Hi everybody, it's Swank Ivy. I'm back with another Letters to an Asexual. This is number 22. Today I'm going to be talking about a kind of dicey issue, which is the criticism that we sometimes get about asexuality from inside the community. First of all, I like to say that we're not always, as a movement, doing everything right. We have a lot of problems within our community that are not being properly addressed or just not balanced as such. Most notably, say, racism and asexual people of color are not equally discussed as an intersectional issue in our community. We do have people of color who identify as asexual, who are they're saying important things, and they are leaders just as much as the white faces you're always seeing on TV, but they just don't seem to be getting as much press. And I would say it's really obvious that racism has a hand in why that is. That is something that our community needs to acknowledge, discuss, and try to fix to the best of our extent. We need our asexual people of color to be part of this movement and to not be forced out by just the racism and the erasure from within the community. We also have some issues with, say, erasure of people with disabilities, erasure of people who masturbate or people who don't, asexual men, etc. There are lots of people, say, asexual people in non-English speaking countries, asexual people who are religious. There are so many factions of asexual people, so many different demographics that really don't get a mainstream voice in our community. And I am one of the people who's always showing up on these talk shows and TV shows and in the articles, getting interviewed and all that. And I function as a pretty mainstream spokesperson for this. So I try to keep myself as informed as I can about these issues, so that at least if I don't draw attention to any of these less commonly discussed issues in the small spaces that I'm allotted by the media that they offer me, I at least will not step on their toes or make things worse. So, I think our responsibility as anybody who's an asexual educator or activist needs to listen to the less common voices in our community and the more marginalized people and the people who are in communities and demographics that are marginalized in other ways besides their asexuality. So that's kind of where I wanted to start with this. But today I am going to be talking about some of the sillier criticism that we get from inside of our community, because mostly on these letters I discuss letters that I receive that I think are from ignorance, so that I can address the ignorance. So today I'm going to read a couple of threads that I got from some Tumblr conversations. So we have some people in the asexual community who are very vocal about hating the asexual community, which is kind of weird. But one of the comments that this person made sounded like this: "You'll notice people who are actually asexual do other things besides blog about how asexy they are." So one of the Tumblr users that I follow said some, pretty cool things about that, a reflection about that, including the following. "So what they're doing here is saying that people who are asexual don't talk about their asexuality." What? The logic there? I hate to play the "but would you say it to a gay person" card, but would you say that to a gay person? It's like saying that Stephen Fry isn't gay because he's done lots of talks about how homosexuality needs to be accepted by people. It's like the opposite of accusing obnoxious vocal homophobes of being gay themselves. I don't understand why you would think that real asexuals don't talk about being asexual. Surely the people who know most about a subject should talk about that subject. Why? Because they've spent years experiencing their field of study, and so they're the best people to spread the correct information. So it goes on a little longer. And I responded to that and I said, it should tell you something when people who accuse us of posting inconsequential twaddle are generally the only ones who write posts containing phrases like, "Look how asexy I am, lol." Newsflash, Asexual people can post glittery pictures of the asexual flag every day on their blog and still deserve respect. They can be in pride parades. They can chant visibility-oriented phrases during marches. They can be really into it. And they're not making anyone look bad or representing a false portrayal of real asexuality. There are heterosexual people who are just as into celebrating their orientation as those asexual people are, except they don't need to restrict it to a pride parade, and they don't need a special button or week or flag or TV show to do it through because it's everywhere. And I gotta say, every time someone judges from looking at my blog that I do nothing but blog about asexuality, I have to wonder how they expect to develop full understanding of the other things I do if they limit their exploration of me to reading my blog. It's just bizarre to me that anyone tries to hold regular discussion of a topic against the people discussing it, as if frequent discussion somehow indicates inauthenticity or unhealthy obsession. You're going to find a lot of asexual stuff on my asexuality-themed blog, aren't you? If you want to go to my 2 YouTube channels, my 2 Twitter accounts, my 3 reading-related sites, my 4 blogs, my 2 webcomics, my various interest-based accounts featuring karaoke and drawing and cooking and spirituality and gardening and dancing and photography and website making and decorating and lots of writing, and my 2 Facebook pages, you're going to find quite a lot of evidence of my life beyond asexuality. The stuff I'm doing in between, like hanging out with my family, going out with my friends, and working for a living, and cooking, cleaning, bathing, sleeping, is probably not going to be real obvious unless you know me in my meat-based life. But you basically have to go out of your way to avoid evidence of my varied and fulfilling life to characterize me this way. And yet people do it all the time, because if I'm just a hilarious, trend-obsessed flake with a pathetic life, I'm that much easier to dismiss and ignore. It's so utterly boring when people try to dictate what conversations we should be having and how much we should be talking. So the person who made the initial dismissive statement came back and responded to what I said and added on this. I said that real asexuals don't constantly blog about their sexuality as if it were a fandom, not that they don't talk about it. 95% of the asexual tag users are sexuals, who hide behind the ace label because it's a quirky and queer and unique community for all. Unless you disagree with us or you're too asexual, you need to be at least a little sexual. Oh my god! Not treating it like a real sexuality, but rather a fandom. Flags, symbols, all that shit. Worse than fucking Super Hulock or whatever it's evolved into now. And I replied to that and I said, well, as we all know, you get to decide who's a real asexual. 95%. Yeah, most of the people who blog about asexuality are totally all about its faddishness, which obviously makes them not real. And you're just the person to decide that for them. Yep, nothing expressed here actually represents how the majority of people are discussing or experiencing their orientation in my experience. And yeah, you're still making a caricature out of people so you don't have to accept them. Feel free to declare 95% of the asexual population far too embarrassing for your real asexual self, and enjoy being more mature and dignified than everyone whose experience you're denying and mocking. I'm not even going to bother to be embarrassed of you because you're not worth it. So that person came back again and simply stated, real asexual equals someone who doesn't experience sexual attraction. And I said, and as we all know, no person who doesn't experience sexual attraction could possibly constantly blog about their sexuality as if it were a fandom, since that disqualifies them too, apparently. And since certain kinds of celebrating and discussing their orientation are too fandom-like, as per your real asexual litmus test. After all, God, we have a flag and stuff. Some people march in parades and stuff. Obviously, that indicates sexual attraction, and not realness. Since there seems to be a name for people who blog about asexuality too much, or not the right way, according to this person, aka 95% not real asexuals. Is there a word for people who spend nearly all of their asexuality-related blogging time telling people they're not really asexual and saying the community is an embarrassment? So now we go on to a slightly more robust argument. The person that initially started this whole thing came back again and said this. I'm pretty sure no one else of any sexuality treats it like a fashion trend. Give it 5 years minimum. Someone will create a new, more quirky sexuality. My guess is pomosexual or sapiosexual. The ace trend will die down. People will stop crying about black rings and how Sherlock should be asexy, and then the rest of us who want to be taken seriously finally can. The whole reason why people don't react too kindly to asexuals is because of this flag/cake/ring/slang bullshit. You know, it's like bisexuality. Kids cling on to it because it's new and cool, but in a few years it will no longer be a trend, and those of that sexuality who weren't just jumping on the bandwagon will be seen as legitimate. Seriously, you can't stop people from saying negative things by all this ace pride crap. If you got rid of that along with the someone doesn't understand what asexual means, therefore I'm gonna yell at them, then I guarantee that everyone would be kinder to asexuals as a whole. Just in case you still don't understand, since none of you actually bother reading my posts beyond the first 2 words, Avon is toxic, flags are stupid in general, it's not a fashion trend, you don't need pride marches, asexuals are not oppressed, gray sexuality and demisexuality are normal sexual behavior and not sexualities. There is no ace spectrum, and it's just a damn sexuality. There ain't nothing special about it, you're no better than homo/bi/heterosexuals. These are not opinions. These are facts. And you need to understand this before your idea of asexual awareness or visibility will actually work. So, my response to that was this. We're not confused about what you believe or reacting to 2-sentence cherry picks. I've been well aware of your bullshit since we had our first conversation, and I really don't care what you think about the community. You've mentioned many times that you wish you were the only asexual in the world, because the community embarrasses you so much. And if that's how you feel, I don't know why you regularly expose yourself to us. But no, our collective disagreement with you is not based on misconceptions about what you think. I've been doing asexuality-related activism for a very long time, and except for you, I have literally never heard someone say the reason we aren't taken seriously is that the asexual community is full of wankers and queer pretenders. The reaction usually sounds more like, asexual? You mean a human can be that? Or, LOL, no, everyone needs sex, or I've never heard of it. They demonstrate a complete lack of awareness about our existence almost all of the time. I fail to see how the whole reason people don't react kindly to asexuals could possibly be because of the community's behavior, if they don't even know we have a community most of the time. Also, I have gay friends, and have been to gay clubs. There is gay culture. There are fashion statements, there are trends, and collective cultural elements that have nothing to do with the central element of being a gay person. And they have been enduring, evolving, and being celebrated since before any of us was born. To point at the asexual community's culture and whine about how it's annoying and short-lived and will disappear in a few years demonstrates a shocking misunderstanding of how subcultures work, and how people find common ground. You're more than welcome to not engage. There are plenty of gay people who don't enjoy certain elements of gay culture, and they're just as gay. They just generally don't feel the need to go on rants about how the drag queens, pride floats, glitter, show tunes, and rainbows make all the stoic gay cowboys look bad. But you can feel free to believe your opinions about the asexual community are not opinions. You can feel free to keep claiming they're facts. You can feel free to keep whining and claiming inclusive activists like me are never going to get anywhere unless we agree with you because, you know, you've totally helped lead a successful movement and I've never done that. I'd better learn from you. I sure wish my activism would work, and I wish my silly attitude weren't holding back my opportunities. I wish I could be interviewed in a dozen magazines and show up in a documentary and be on TV and get asexuality articles published and get a book deal and be invited to speak at queer conferences. I sure wish the mainstream world was taking an interest in our movement in a meaningful way, partly with the help of my contributions. Sure wish that stuff would happen for me. Tell me how it's done. Tell me how to get the mic handed to me, oh successful asexuality activist, right? So that person responded with a short little sentence saying, FYI, activism isn't getting upset to people on Tumblr.com and waving ace flags around. Activism is doing good things and making a difference, which you aren't. And I replied, yeah, tell me more about how much of a difference I'm not making, and how all the things I'm doing are actually just waving ace flags around. So this is where it got kind of funny. the person that I was arguing with responded with this. Okay then, well, if you don't believe me, would you kindly point me as to where you've made asexuality universally accepted and used correctly? Can you show me where you ended prejudice or confusion toward asexuals? Because I don't see a fucking difference whatsoever. Here's my reply. Strap in, everyone. Oh, okay. So if I haven't made asexuality universally accepted, LOLOL, then I'm not doing a good job. Better tell all the queer activists that they have also failed to do a good job because homosexuality isn't universally accepted too. But if you have no idea who I am or what I do, and really think my major contribution has been getting upset to people on Tumblr.com, have fun. This list will be more for my other readers though, honestly, because you will dismiss them as doing more harm than help, since you and I disagree on what asexuality used correctly would look like. 1. Got a book deal with a mainstream publisher, which will help educate people. And because it hadn't come out yet at that time, I posted a picture of the Publisher's Marketplace announcement of its sale, and obviously it's here now, so book, hooray! And I continued and I said, it will be the first non-academic, asexuality-related book released by a mainstream book publisher ever in the world. No big deal though, I'm probably just whining on Tumblr. 2. I was one of the main interviewees of the movie Asexual. The movie is available on Netflix and iTunes, and while I have no idea how many times it has actually been watched, it has been rated over 65,000 times just on Netflix. I regularly receive mail about this movie and am profusely thanked for making a difference. 3. I wrote my first article about asexuality in 1998. It contained the 10 most common comments I got and why they were wrong. It evolved into this version of the ramble, and I linked, which continues to get me email and comments. The site doubles as a resource hub as it has links to over 100 articles, mainstream video, interviews, and blogs to help people understand asexuality. The comments make it clear that many people were led to understand asexuality better through my efforts. 4. I've had 7 articles published about asexuality, and since I wrote this, I had another one, so they were all published in non-asexual specific spaces and spoke to the interested audience of sex-positive folks and sex educators whose understanding of asexuality is crucial to passing on an understanding of asexuality as a legitimate possibility when they work with clients, partners, and students. They cover such topics as why the mainstream sex-positive community should support asexuality, how to do asexual relationships, how to be an asexual ally, and why asexuality isn't about antisexuality. The comments feature these folks expressing appreciation and thanking me, and I linked all of the articles. 5. I have been interviewed repeatedly in the mainstream press since 2005. I hope you wouldn't argue that mainstream interviews are useless since, yeah, we need that if people outside the talking to ourselves bubbles are ever going to know that we exist. And I named a bunch of the places that I've been interviewed and linked. So, then number 6. I have represented asexuality at one conference so far as a panelist for the Asexuality panel at Creating Change. In February, I will be speaking at Princeton, obviously that already happened, doing a 201 level discussion of the intersection of the asexual community with the queer community at IVQ. Both of these were LGBT-specific conferences that wanted to include asexuality. IVQ is paying to fly me up there and put me up. In both cases, the queer community wanted to know how and in what capacity to include us, and even in cases where asexual people do not feel that they have anything in common with the queer community, the LGBT community has a slightly different way of approaching asexuality because of shared exclusion and having been desexualized or told to be asexual, so to speak. I hope nobody would suggest attending events and giving real-time engagement to these populations and airtime to these issues is just a bunch of unhelpful bullshit. And also since then, I have done the Toronto conference and spoken at University of Virginia. So, okay, going on. Number 7, I run a YouTube channel that is primarily about asexuality. I have over 2,000 subscribers, and now it's almost 4,000. And hundreds of thousands of views and tens of thousands of comments. many of them positive, and many of them making it clear why awareness is needed. I'm not exaggerating whatsoever when I say I receive email every day from asexual people thanking me for helping them understand themselves, and from non-asexual people who recognize the importance of our efforts or thank me for my help in understanding the asexual people in their lives. And 8, when my book comes out, I already have interviews, reviews, and promotions lined up with some very big blogs and shows. I've even been invited on Dr. Phil, and some sexuality-related organizations, bloggers, and individuals are going to feature and review the book to mainstream audiences. These include sex therapists, sex educators, sexuality-related and LGBT-related organizations and publications, and culture-related authors. Since it is not going to be released until fall 2014, my publicist has yet to line up everything that will be lined up, but let's just say this is not going to come out in a whisper. I venture to say having a publisher, editor, publicist, and literary agent working to promote my asexuality-related writing constitutes helping with asexuality efforts, but I am, after all, just a Tumblr.com whiner, and a participant in a toxic culture, so what important work have I done, really? Sure wish I knew how to effect positive change and spread my message. I clearly have no idea how to do it. If only I could stop waving an asexy flag long enough to realize I'm not making a difference, right? So one more time, the person came back and predictably mocked what I said. And they replied, "Oh wow, you did official sounding things. That doesn't mean you're right or that you're helping." You know what got officially published? 50 Shades of Grey, the book about a romanticized, abusive relationship that makes even the shittiest sex-positive BDSM supporters shake their heads. Oh, it was published. I guess this means it's fine to abuse women in the name of being a dom. Sorry to break it to you, but it isn't that hard to get your book out there. I could write a book about actual cat feces and get it published. I could write any old shit and sell it under an official publisher. I know people who've written books. It isn't special. You won't make a difference. The asexual community is literally the fuck hate of asexuality, and just because it gets publicity doesn't make it right. I'm sure fuck hate have a lot of customers and supporters too. In fact, celebrities joined in. So there. They actually said so there. So I replied one more time and I said, "Keep pretending nothing I do is important if that's what you need to do. I didn't at any point suggest that my getting published is what makes me right, or my official affiliations are what make me right. You asked me to show where my efforts are helping with awareness, and in every single point I explained how they were received, positively, by people who needed to hear the message. Predictably, all you did was dismiss that and rewrite my point as if I'm trying to prove I'm important because I got a publishing deal. And that you could do that too. Sure you could. Go for it. Publish your hate wank for this community. That would do a much better job making a difference, I'm sure. I showed you where my work was being widely distributed, was being well received, and was making a difference in individual lives. You responded to it so fast that there's no way you actually clicked on a link or tried to see for yourself what I'm putting out there. It doesn't matter, because no matter what I say, there is no proof that you will accept. I'm clearly not helping anyone because it is not your message that I'm spreading. And no matter how many thousands of messages I've gotten that called me a godsend and a fantastic educator and a breath of fresh air, my contribution won't be real to you because you don't like the community. You can't accept that anything I've done could have possibly achieved anything but hurting real asexuals like you. But what I have shown you is that my message is accessible and is being accessed. And that I have one of the largest audiences for asexual material in the world, not all of it from inside the community either. Dismissing all of it out of hand by twisting my message into, "Look at me, I got a book deal, I wrote official shit, I must be right," is really silly and pointless, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Everyone can see what you're doing. Everyone can see that you're acting the way people act when they know they can't clap back. You're not actually even very good at the straw man argument, the one where you rebuild someone's argument as something absurd so you can knock it down. So I really do recommend that you just take your own advice and effect positive change yourself instead of sitting in a plastic chair in the corner frowning and telling us we're all doing it wrong. So, that was my rant on Tumblr.com. And I do sometimes get, usually not quite as prolific responses, but occasionally just asexual people will message me and say, "Oh, I don't agree that asexual people can possibly masturbate because that's by definition sexual, so I don't acknowledge the legitimacy of those asexual people, you know, or they'll have some kind of similar rant about how they don't believe asexuality should be considered any kind of spectrum, or they'll suggest that if I include people who have intersex variations, or asexual people who have disabilities or are on medication, in my acceptance of, you know, everybody who identifies as asexual as legitimately actually being asexual, regardless of what complicating factors they may or may not have. You know, I'm being told that I'm you know, spreading problematic beliefs, when actually I believe that you can't go wrong with being more inclusive with people. When we're trying to teach people to listen, we're trying to teach people to hear what the people in the community are saying about how they feel and how they identify. So I don't see how asking people not to use this label when they feel it describes them is helping anybody at all. So it all kind of goes back to the unassailable asexual phenomenon, which I've also done videos on, and you can probably find some better than mine. So, but that about wraps that up. I just wanted to make it clear that the asexual community doesn't always agree on everything, and sometimes we have very silly arguments with each other about how we should be doing this. So I would like to close by saying that if anybody who's watching my videos wants to ask me about an issue that I don't seem to have covered, or they think that I'm approaching something incorrectly and I haven't addressed it, my position on something, I absolutely want to be more inclusive and more supportive of everybody who identifies as asexual, and everybody who's on the spectrum, in accurately describing and being inclusive of everyone. So, you know, you're free to comment and tell me what you'd like to hear more about, and what any kind of criticisms that you have of my approach to awareness activism. Of course, just telling me that I need to get off the stage, or telling me that because I post my hate mail, it's just not helping anything. I don't really think that's gonna work for me, but I'm happy to listen to you know, constructive criticism about any of my methods. So you know, that's your invitation, and beyond that, I will just see you next time I make a video. Thanks for watching.